All right, so call the meeting to the order of the local comprehensive planning committee subcommittee meeting. The focus of our work today deals with the existing conditions, and so I see that everybody's present. And I didn't see an agenda on the calendar actually for the town. So I'm going to just kind of follow the same pattern that we did before and ask if anybody's recording this. I don't have the official language for that, but if I don't see anybody from the public here either, so I know you guys aren't recording it because you already have access to the recording for yourself. So hearing nobody saying that they are in fact recording it separately. Go ahead, Kate.
Right. Thank you, Felicia. I apologize. It should have been on the calendar. I know I sent it, but it must have. It's on the LCP website and it should be on the LCP committee page. If we could just take a quick roll call of the subcommittee members for the record.
Okay, Felicia Penn, Chair.
Fran Parks.
Megan Mort.
All
Okay.
present and accounted for.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, really appreciate your time this morning. I think that we had a really productive meeting last week, and I just want to follow up with where we stand after that meeting and then coordinate some more review and discussion this morning. I'm going to share my screen. I thought last time I received really great feedback for the 30 or so comments that we received from the public. There's a few that I'm finalizing edits with town staff, but what I'll do is I'll have a red line ready at least a week and a half in advance of the full committee meeting so that we can go through it with the full committee, but I have good guidance from you on the language that you're looking for. So I think we're in pretty good shape. Again, thank you for staying a little bit later last meeting. With these 30 or so comments, I have some ready to go, but I think I'll just give you the red line once it's all together. I'm just waiting on a few more responses. I think the only outstanding, when I look back at my notes, the only outstanding comment that we said that we wanted to table for today was the comment on the high arts. So I think today, if we can go over the high arts comment, then we'll have the 30 or so comments from the public coordinated. And then the other efforts that I'd like to achieve is we did receive the 2 letters. So we received a letter from Heather Hunt as well as from the Barnstable Land Trust. I'd like to look at those 2 letters with the subcommittee this morning to coordinate any edit suggestions related to those letters. And then Felicia, I did include prior to the last meeting, you received some suggested language to include, which speaks to the history of Hyannis broadly, and we can look at that. But I think those are the remaining efforts. So the high arts comment, the 2 letters that were submitted, and then this additional language and anything else that the subcommittee would like to discuss. And then the only other thing which I'm already coordinating is Bob Twist had provided some comments. He noticed that there's 2 of the same maps in the report. So I've already reached out to Barrett Planning Group. They're providing me with feedback as to whether they intended to have the same maps or if they should be different. And then one of the maps was missing. It didn't have the latest zoning. It was missing the ground mounted photovoltaic overlay district. And Barrett Planning Group has already reached out to our GIS to update that map. So I will report back on the status of those 2 maps when we have our full committee meeting. So that sounds good to everyone. We'll get started with, I think this was the only comment that we didn't dive into further, which was with regard to the high arts campus. And I'm trying to remember what the specific dialogue was that we had, but this was the
I'll go away.
we received. Can everyone see, or do you want me to zoom into this a little bit more closely?
Could you zoom in a bit, please?
Yeah.
All right, so it's true that the Hyannis Arts District is a manufactured thing. I mean, it was created by the town as an economic development arm. I'm not sure what page 91 is. Is that part of historic, historic or cultural?
Yeah, let me pull up let me pull up that section. I'm just going to drop my screen and pull that up because I think it's helpful to see the language. It's, broadly speaking to our cultural resources. So it's like I mentioned, it's under our cultural resources section, and it talks about how here in Barnstable, we have two cultural districts. We have the one in Barnstable Village, the Barnstable Village Cultural District, and we have the Hyannis High Arts, and these are established cultural districts through the Mass Cultural Council. And then it talks about, broadly, it defines those two cultural districts.
Okay, so this language here, my opinion, this is just my opinion, is open for all discussion. I'm not telling anybody how to feel or think about this, is about, I mean, the comments are correct that these are manufactured and these are created by us, but they're state designated cultural districts so that we can apply for cultural grants for the town. Right. Either through the state or the county or any other place that we can find grant money, etc. So at the beginning, if you go back up to the top, Kate, if you could, just of the top of the cultural districts, yeah, two established cultural districts. The one in Barnstable Village is also manufactured. That came long after the Hyannis one did. And they did it as a village effort to do the same thing as Hyannis was doing, is to get grant money to redevelop arts and culture in the area. Mostly tourist targeted, but also creates more opportunity for local people to show their arts, participate in arts, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I think they say that they're established cultural districts, the language here says, which is accurate. And then in the window here, it talks about the designation by the state. The comments that, go ahead, anybody else?
I was just going to say, can we go back to the comment?
Yeah, I was just going to get back to that. Let's go back to that.
Yeah.
Seems to me that somebody just appeared upset that we're only talking about established or manufactured, their words, district, and that what do we actually consider the cultural heritage to be? So we can address that later if we want to talk about that submission, Kate, that came in from an individual about Hyannis's history.
Sure.
But then this comment switches to the historical destruction, I would call it, or I'm not sure whatever else you would call it. But the real question here is how will we define her? I assume that means Hyannis's future is something other than a struggle for resources. That's a heck of a philosophical question to ask right here. I'm not sure I have the ability to even answer that, but it's a very good question. So there's a bit of anger in the beginning, and I can understand that. It's a pretty important thing. So, but I think we can answer that if we get to that last submission. Megan, did you have comments?
I was really just going to say, like, if we're going to focus on planning for how to, respect and define and encourage and all those things, cultural districts, then I would think that that would go into the planning portion of this as well.
The phase 2, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, but this might give it, give guidance to what that phase 2 would end up working on. You know, this might be the springboard for that. So
Yeah.
we might want to come back to this after we've reviewed those other initiated comments and then come back to this and see if we can make suggestions. Does that make
Was there
sense, to you
another-
guys?
Yeah, was there another comment about the archaeological historical sites, or am I thinking
There
about the
is.
letter?
Yep, there is, and I did reach out. Oh, sorry, it's hard with Excel sometimes. There was a comment about the number of sites, and I did reach out to MHC, the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and I do have their values received. So I will be updating those numbers in the report to reflect what I have from MHC.
Okay.
I have
I
a
feel like
question
that could
about
go
the,
into it too.
I have a
Okay,
question about the archaeological sites. When someone is digging for a building or whatever, and they find something, does the town or state require them to stop and get an archaeologist in to evaluate what they found? Do we know that?
I believe so.
I'm
I
not
know
as
that's the
familiar.
policy. I know that's a
Did-
policy of the commission, but I'm not sure about the town.
Right, yeah, I'm not certain on the local level. I know if you're filing anything that requires state permits, they absolutely require you to stop work immediately and notify the state. Likely there's something at the local level that they ethically are supposed to stop work. I'm not certain if there's anything bound in our rules and regulations, but we could certainly look into that.
Yeah, I think that's something that needs to be addressed.
No, I agree. That's a must. Yeah. And we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. The language is pretty much written. We just have to make it ours.
Right.
Megan, did you have another comment?
No, it was just kind of when we're talking about the cultural, that they're, referring to history here. I think that the archaeological sites would be a good thing to go back to as well.
Right. Okay,
Okay. All right, so those were the 30 comments. Like I said, I've got all of your feedback and just we're waiting on a few responses, but I'll have a red line ready at least a week and a half before the full committee meeting so we can look
Good
at
for you.
those edits. So then the other 2 letters that we received a letter from Heather Hunt. What I've done is I've just pulled out some of the language that I thought I wanted to bring to the table for discussion, but I can also pull up the full letter, and I'm not sure if the subcommittee was prepared with discussing any particular items within the letter. So we can make sure that we address any of the language in the letter that the subcommittee wanted to work through.
yeah, I went through the letter. It's 4 pages and she spent an awful lot of time writing this, obviously. So I have some key stuff here. I don't know what anybody else has done, but the objective and fact-based, no value judgments or opinions. I think I made comments to that effect also when I submitted mine to you. So I totally agree with that. I mean, this isn't some essay that somebody's writing to make it sound better. I mean, we want to just deal with, what did they used to say on Dragnet, just the facts, Jack, or whatever it was. So it's existing conditions and we should state it that way and not have any subjective adjectives or anything else in here. So no opinions, no value judgments. I agree with that. Does anybody else want to comment on that from the committee?
No, I agree with that 100%. And I did
Okay.
underline that.
All right. Megan, you good?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So as a result, that language on page 45, that it is subjective and it's talking about how Barnstable has a long history of sound land use policy to build upon, etc. We would remove that language because it's subjective. And then if there's any other language that the subcommittee saw that was subjective, certainly let us know and we'll comb through it as well.
Yeah, I think that there was an issue about lots of single people living, I commented on this too, living in a 3-bedroom house, and therefore there's a major need for studios and 1-bedrooms. I mean, there's no, that's kind of a made up theory, I think. I didn't see any research that supports that. And so I think we should look at that language also and
Okay.
deal with that. Anybody have comments? That's just off the top of my head. I remember that.
I mean, I think given the housing crisis and what people are looking for, it's a fair assumption, but there should be data that backs it up.
Yeah, if the data says so, fine. But if there's no data, let's not assume.
Correct.
So we want to continue. I just wrote out some, I went over her letter the other day and just made some highlights for myself. So is it okay if I go down my list? And then if anybody has other, we'll discuss each one. And then if anybody has other ones they want to bring to the table, we'll certainly do that. Does that make sense?
Yes, please.
Okay, so she has had an objective. Oh, no, she was concerned about the statement about conforming to the Cape Cod Commission template and regional policy plan. And she had questions or disclosures that she'd like to have happen, either or in both, I think. So this is up for big discussion, and maybe we want to bring this to the full committee. I'm not sure what the subcommittee wants, but I'm open to all suggestions. One of the things she talked about was the benefits, obligations, and detriments to the town just automatically assuming that they're going to conform to the Cape Cod Commission RPP. And she was looking for definition of benefits. She wanted to know if that community views have ever been tested on this. That's a reasonable question to ask. She wanted to know, is full conformance and certification essential? In other words, she wanted to know, could the town conform in XYZ ways, but make a declaration that they consciously are not conforming in these specific areas of the plan, because for Barnstable, we need to divert for the following reasons. I mean, it all has to be for reason. It can't just be because you don't like something, obviously. But it's a heck of a question to ask. And I just want to remind everybody and fully disclose to the public that I worked very closely with the Cape Cod Commission hand in hand, because I spent over 20 years either as a member or as the chair of the Cape Cod Economic Development Council, which was a county-based group. So at the time, when regional policy plans first came to be, we thought it was a wonderful thing to have a technical assistance be provided to the towns, because so many small towns don't have staffs like we have. Like everybody on the screen who's a staff member today probably doesn't exist in some of the smaller towns. And also so that you don't have things like National Seashore happening in the Outer Cape and then nothing happening elsewhere on the Cape. That should be carried out through, if possible, et cetera, not everywhere, obviously. And so, so I had, let's say, at that time, a very positive view of the efforts of the Cape Cod Commission, but I've come to look back at that in a more analytical way now, because I've seen some decisions that they have recently made, say in the last 8 years, something like that, that just seems more subjective rather than objective. So the question is, it's really a question of local rule. Should the town, the people in the town need to know, and the staff and the members of our committee need to know, what are the benefits of complying 100% with the RPP? Or are there detriments? What are our obligations as a town and a community to the Cape Cod Commission if we do comply? And what happens if we don't? And do we have to comply 100% in order to be certified, and is certification worth it? I think those are the questions that she's asking. Good for her. Didn't even
Full-
occur to me. Didn't even occur to me when I was reading this, because I just gave you my background and why I would assume that we would conform. But Jim, did you
Felicia-
want
Yeah, if I may. So I agree that, it's good to question, what the end result may be. I don't see how this applies whatsoever to existing conditions, though. This is, the understanding of where we are as a community, the policy of how to establish a plan, I feel like is dramatically a different question. However, with that being said, the importance of looking regionally while developing this plan, I think, is significant. I think it is very important to look beyond our boundaries to understand the impacts of all of these overarching concerns, such as water quality, transportation. Obviously, 28 doesn't stop at our town line. So understanding development that happens at Mashpee or Yarmouth and how that impacts our roadway network is certainly something to be cognizant of as we're developing a long-range plan. And in terms of the requirements from the regional policy plan, these are good planning practices that I think are the foundation, is the reason why it's the foundation of our plan and the plan that was last completed. This is, as you guys may know, I mean, this is the exact same process as the rest of the Commonwealth. They just operate under Mass General Law, which has this almost verbatim categories of uses that we are supposed to be looking at. The Cape Cod Commission does take it a little bit further and being able to look at things like resiliency and all that. So it gets a little bit more specific. But these are the minimum thresholds that I think any good planning outfit would start to look at. And then we build locally on them to say, all right, transportation networks are different in Barnstable because we have a regional commercial hub and whatever else there may be. So we can certainly, I think this committee will certainly make it their own. But the overarching question of what are the benefits, I mean, we can go through those. I feel like that question though gets moved to, okay, tell me, where the grant dollars are and what this is and what that is. But really what we should be looking at here is good planning practice. And looking regionally is certainly something that I would recommend the committee look at.
Felicia, may I make a comment?
Sure.
So first of all, I agree with you 100%. I felt the same way when the notion of a Cape Cod Commission was put to us and I voted for it. And now I'm not so happy with what they're doing. And I think a great part of that is the homogenization of our peninsula. It's I think the best interests of the town of Barnstable sometime are put aside so that we are, because regionalization is more important. I starred that. I don't think that my vision for the town of Barnstable is the same as the regional policy plan of the Cape Cod Commission. And I think they have grown to be more of have grown more tentacles to get into every part of our operations on the town level. And I'm not sure that that's good. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you for that. Megan, do you have a comment you'd like to make?
Yeah, I think if we're going to take this kind of perspective into, or this perspective into consideration, then I would have liked to have had it earlier. I think if we're going to answer a lot of these, we'd be moving backwards. especially when we're talking about existing conditions right now. And I really want to move forwards. As far as my opinion of the Cape Cod Commission, I don't have a strong one either way. When I got into this committee, I'm focusing on Barnstable. And if I'm gonna like zoom out and look at the regional aspect of this, then, you know, I think it plays an important role, but I'm really kind of focused on Barnstable in this. Maybe that's narrow-sighted of me. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't really know where to go with this. I mean, are we going to go backwards, and are we going to look at all of this, the benefits, obligations, and detriments? It seems like a beginning thing. Like it seems
No,
like
I think it might come up on phase 2, and it might be a good conversation to have in certain areas, not necessarily the whole draft that we come up with. Getting back to Jim's comment about it doesn't deal with existing conditions, you know, why are we talking about it here? He didn't, those are my words, not his, obviously, but you know, because it says in the existing conditions that we will conform to this. So perhaps this should be handled in some sort of an intro paragraph in phase 2 after we have a discussion about it, and not bog down on the existing conditions that we're doing here. But I think that I'd like subcommittee members to really think about, be prepared for that discussion when we get there, and think about it, because Jim's right. You know, we're in the middle of the Cape, and things that happen over our borders really do affect us, because we can't change the, you know, the major arteries that run through us or anything else that's happening. But it's to think about whether full conformance and certification is essential, I think does get to benefits that the town receives from the county, okay, the Cape Cod Commission, which is the planning arm of the county. So I would hope that staff would prepare some sort of summary, maybe if you could, of what you believe the you know, the direct technical assistance that we receive, and you know, if dollars and cents are involved, we should have some idea. Is it 50 grand a year? Is it 250,000 a year? Is it 10,000? I mean, I don't have a clue. So you know, if the town is benefiting in a way, then let's make sure we get the value of those benefits. And if we're not benefiting so much, other than for you know, we can call them up anytime and ask them, hey, how do you handle this? How do you handle that? Then you can do that anyway, just
Yeah,
because you're a member of it. So
Felicia, you make a really good point there in terms of you know, the language. We do address it early on in the document. So you're right. We should be very clear as to why that statement. So you're absolutely correct. And I think we could certainly offer some language there that I think talks about not just the dollars and cents, but we can spell that out if you think it's important, but more in the context of why you know, we meet those minimum standards, which those standards talk about, like, you know, again, water quality, open space, all that stuff. Because I think about you know, out of in Kentuit, when we heard the folks in Kentuit, they were concerned about their water quality in the harbors. Well, that's not going to improve if, you know, Mashpee isn't also doing their bare minimums to improve water quality. You know, there's things where I think it's important to meet those minimum standards, so that we are improving. We're doing our part on this peninsula too. But we can certainly offer some language there.
okay. I think we made enough point and spent enough time on this for today. What do you think for this
Yeah.
particular section? You guys good?
Good.
Okay. To go on in Ms. Hunt's letter, she does state that there is no, and I noticed this in several documents I've read recently, there's no mention of the effect of short-term rentals on our economy and our housing supply. And that is a big oversight, because, you know, I don't know if anybody reads the New York Times, that they had you know, their magazine is sometimes crazy and out of the world, but they had a cover article on the world housing shortage, okay, worldwide. And they did some detailed stuff on what was built when and how they built it and what was incentivized and what's happening today and multifamily housing, this, that, whatever, public housing. You know, it was an astounding article. And but they did mention short-term rentals and the commodification of real estate and the problems it's caused on a worldwide basis. It's not just Cape Cod, and it's not just the United States, it's everywhere. Australia, Austria, I mean, you name it. It's everywhere. So for this report as an existing condition, to absolutely not even mention that is not good, because when we get to phase 2, we absolutely need to address that. And there's a whole philosophical difference, I'm sure. People are going to be putting their gloves on the committee about this, but it's, you know, it's astounding, the problems that it's caused, as we all know. So that needs to be added. I'm not sure what page that was on that she referred to it, but we need to find a way to add it. You know, we can't take somebody else's graphics and put them in there, but it is very important that we put local housing needs in front of, and we give them preference over investors' housing needs. There's no doubt in my mind. So how we do that, I don't know, but it needs to be in existing conditions. Otherwise, it'll never make it into phase 2. And it's essential that it be there.
And I think
Any
this
other
was a
comments?
comment. Oh,
Yep.
I apologize. I think this was a similar comment that we heard within the online submissions as well. So as mentioned, I'm pulling together that data for the short-term rentals and second homes from building, and we can incorporate language that we'll have ready for the
Okay.
next, full committee meeting. Certainly, we've heard these comments more than once.
Yeah, so I guess it's pretty important. If we had 30 comments and we heard it 5 times, then it's pretty important, I'd say. Yeah, she asked that lack of local media, and said something about robust broadband. My words, not hers, being included in, is that infrastructure or page 86?
Can I make a comment about the housing?
Sure.
Again, I'm not sure which page she was referring to, but in the housing production plan right now, we have data about the impact, at least some data about the impact of short-term rentals. And I know that right now, what we have says that 6 to 9% of the housing supply goes to short-term rentals, while 33% or more is second homeowners.
Right.
So if we're going to put data in there, I think it should also, like, we don't solve the second homeowner problem, but it is a huge problem.
Right.
That I
Oh,
think
I
a lot of
agree. I
people
think-
underestimate.
I think both of them together, when you add them up, it's such a significant number that they both need to be dealt with. I think we have more say for second homeowners than we can for investors, because they're over the bridge in someplace else and
Yeah.
they don't really in the internet, you know, it's just, you're right. So we'll add second homeowners to that. We should also, we're not referring to resources in the existing conditions, I don't think, but we should definitely mention the housing production plan as a resource for sure.
There's
Just like we
also,
should mention open space and recreation plan, same thing. Yes, go ahead.
there's I'd love to, and I know that we've brought this up at several housing committee meetings, have the actual number of units of short-term rentals in Barnstable. If there's any way we could get that, that would be very helpful. And it would also be helpful to know the number of second homes, but I don't know how difficult that would be.
Yeah, so I'm coordinating those values. Certainly some of the values swing throughout the year, but we can get the average from building, and we can work on that language.
That would be great.
Yeah, I have a problem with the air nibs and all of that. there was some talk a while ago about just the owner, the homes had to be owner occupied when it was rented out. And I think that when, you know, I wasn't sure if that was correct, but I don't think, I think we need to do something to control the, you know, the off-Cape owner of these homes that are being used for 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time. You know, we've that just never works out well if somebody isn't around to you know, oversee the use of the house. And I'm just not a fan of the short-term rentals.
Yeah, no, I think we need to really concentrate on this on phase 2, and that's why it's important to have the language here on existing conditions, because that will guide what gets written into the actual plan as we go forward. So I'm not discounting your opinion. I'm saying, yeah, absolutely, it needs, but it needs to appear here first. So we'll do that, and then we'll get into all kinds of ideas of what we can do. We've had, as a town, you know, the problem is, I don't know if I've said this before or not, but the town almost benefits from short-term rentals because the money, the room tax that gets applied to a short-term rental goes to the town. It's going to help build our sewers infrastructure. Personally, I think it should be dedicated to housing, but what do I know?
Yeah.
But it's a hard thing to say, hey, let's put a cap on this and let's enforce this when the town's benefiting from the income. So that's another discussion. I'm not saying that's a bad plan. I'm just saying, wow, look at what it created. So that should be a lively discussion in phase 2.
Well, that needs to be a cost benefit discussion. You know,
Yeah.
maybe the costs are, in my opinion, outweighing the benefits.
Certainly when you see, I mean, this article I read on Sunday, it basically says that, and this is worldwide, it blew my mind that it was worldwide. I just saw it as a Cape Cod thing, that every 1 and 2 bedroom small starter home, quote unquote, is something like 78% of them, or some outrageous number, have been purchased by investors for short-term rentals. Worldwide, what does that do to every single community where that happens? It's just mind-boggling, and it's cheaper for them to do that than it is to build new or whatever. You know, it's awful. Anyway, okay. She made a comment about page 86 and lack of local media, and the fact that the broadband, you know, it's the COVID factor, I guess, that's missing on the media thing. Lack of local media, serious issue. Let me see. Oh, that's under telecommunications. I don't know if local media is telecommunications actually, because we still do have radio stations, but it is true that media is part of an infrastructure of a community, and our local media is severely lacking. Our weekly doesn't report on meetings and happenings in our community anymore. It's just a regurgitation of the daily, basically. So somehow that could be in there. It wouldn't hurt anybody. You guys okay with that?
Yes.
And broadband, because of everybody relocating here during COVID, I think that's a serious problem here. Our fiber optic, or however you want to call it, infrastructure is severely lacking because there's no competition.
That's right.
Right? Okay. She wrote something about exemptions to zoning and its effect throughout the town. Now that is very specific to an Osterville problem on Main Street. And, you know, it's interesting. I've heard this from more than one resource, from more than Ms. Hunt. There was a Zoom meeting. Oh gosh, I think it had to do with housing, the housing production plan. Did we have Zoom sessions on that back in the winter or last fall or sometime?
Yeah, and I think some of them were hybrid too, at least one of
Yeah.
them.
And I think there were some people on that call from, they were from Osterville who were very incensed about this very same issue. Said it in different words, but it was the same meeting. So it, you know, that's out there in that village. And I don't know that that belongs for existing conditions here right now, but that needs to be a discussion at some point in time. And I think we need to think about how we handle this as a philosophical thing. Exemptions to zoning and their basic effect on the economy and character in the area where the exemptions take place. I have no idea where that discussion should take place, but I'm just making a note of that.
I mean, we have,
Go ahead.
we have industrial zones, and that's where that warehouse should have gone, not on South County Road. It's huge. And it's, no trees are blocking it. It's, that was property, I believe that was property owned by Ambassador Kennedy. And at one point, where the Cape Cod Academy is and all back in there. And at one point, there was a plan to subdivide it for housing. And I don't remember what happened to that after that. I was only 15 or something when that was going on, but
So is that where the wool shop was?
yes,
Oh, no kidding.
behind where the wool shop was, in behind there.
Yeah.
All that property, I'm not exactly sure how much he owned, but, and I can't remember, it was a hue and cry when the housing project came up, and I was only a kid, so I just paid attention to the headlines, but that it went nowhere.
So now we got a warehouse.
And now we got a warehouse, that's right.
Jeez, oh my God. All right. There's a comment in here about on page 9 that Ms. Hunt is tying that into overloaded septic systems because this ties back to short-term rentals. Basically, there's no enforcement for the occupancy, which this is one of those environmental effects from short-term rentals, I guess. So this is part of that whole discussion. At least she's consistent. Good for her. I don't know that this deals with existing conditions. How do you want to handle this as a committee? Just part of the
Well,
short-term rental discussion?
I don't know about the short-term rental discussion, but there's a higher occupancy rate in housing. Again, I'd love to see data to back these things up, but when people lose housing and they're not able to find any more, then they pack together in houses where they're able. So you're gonna get,
Yeah, I don't know that she
2,
was
4, 6
talking about,
adults.
yeah, she wasn't talking about year-round people. I think she was talking about vacationers.
Yeah.
Well, one way or the other, it's overoccupied.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So one way or the other, it's an issue, obviously.
Right.
Okay, but with different solutions, obviously. The year-rounders need year-round housing, the vacationers need to comply with the law. That's the way I see it, but what do I know? Okay, moving on from that. Let me see. Oh, yeah, she's got that. She questioned also page 125, the statement regarding need to downsize. Wanted to see data. We've already addressed that. She referred to the COVID effect. We already addressed that. She did a very lengthy discussion about town's actions on affordable housing. I don't know that that affects the existing conditions report for ourselves, but I think everybody should be aware. I think we need to be aware of this. So when you look back on things that have happened, what the cumulative effect of those actions are in town might have stabbed us in the back quite a bit. So I think it's all good information here, but I don't see it should it be included in the existing conditions report that these actions were taken and that's why maybe we have a problem? Or should it be more available for the discussion when it comes to housing in phase 2? So we're not ignoring it, we're just moving it as a basis for discussion for phase 2. What's your pleasure? I assume you've read this already.
Yeah, I think it is an existing conditions problem.
Okay.
That we find ourselves in.
So what language do you want to see included in the existing conditions, Fran? Can you help us with that?
Well, back to the number of houses that are being used for short-term rentals. I heard on the radio yesterday that Falmouth had just completed 33 low to moderate income units. I think they're apartments. And I don't understand why we aren't doing that.
Yeah. The town has, I can tell you, I had a discussion with our town manager, my gosh, probably 9 months ago or something, asking him similar question, not relating it to, well, I did relate to other towns, but in the other direction. And he basically said that would be, for the town to be proactive in doing projects like that would be a philosophical change from how the town operates now. And he went through that in detail with me. And I asked him at the end of the comment, so how's that working for us, do you think?
Yeah, right.
He didn't really answer my question, but it was obvious to me that discussion needs to be had. But that needs to, I don't think that can come out of a subcommittee or an LCPC committee. I think that has to be a meeting with town council who sets policy.
Yeah.
Our report should set our final, LCP set policy too. So that's another thing for discussion, whether it should be proactive town that decides what gets built where and how many and for whom, or whether it should be the private market that decide, a developer that decides that. So that's the question you're asking, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think a good example of what we should be doing is, of course, it didn't make the residents of Katuitt very happy, but after World War II, a section of it's Crocker Neck Road in Pompanesett, a developer named Kelly came and built the Kellyville homes. And those were affordable homes for World War II veterans and other people. And that's that's what we need. I think, I don't think that a golf course in Hyannis should be made into housing units. I think there are other places in the town where we can find to put affordable housing, but I just don't think we're working as hard on it as we should.
So Felicia, I think we can certainly, make note of that in the existing conditions, that it's a strain, it's an issue that we have, and I think that's all of the things that Fran just mentioned, I think are great opportunities for strategies in phase 2 there that we can identify, and which in turn, to your point, Felicia, we can point back to when discussing the matter with town council or leadership to say, look, this was identified as a goal. Here's a list of strategies, and we should be pursuing these over the next handful of years.
Okay. Because it just really killed me on that. She's got the first, but her bullet point is about 850 Falmouth Road. I think everybody here knows what project that is. And that could have been 100, that was zoned. It was the only zone in town that was zoned for multifamily affordable housing, 100%. Okay, so that's 55 to 65 units that could have been built 100% affordable housing. It was the only zone in town that did that. And that got removed, that zone got removed in favor of market rate, whatever it is, with some affordable in there, but certainly not 55 to 65 units. But that zone never got replaced anyplace else. So for a town to complain that we don't have enough affordable housing, I mean, why didn't we replace the zone somewhere, or not negotiate away, 85% of the units that we originally could have been built there? I don't know. It's standing on the outside and looking in is baffling to me that these decisions get made, even though our policy says other stuff. So anyway.
Is that, I know that there's a policy to, like, the Bornstein's plan on South Street, that didn't go to the Cape Cod Commission. I can't remember what it's called when the town doesn't do that, but has some sort of streamlined process for the developer. Is that what happened on Falmouth Road? Do you know?
No, what happened? Well, no, what happened on Falmouth Road is these two developers came to town, so we want to buy this. This is what we want to do with it. And so the town had some public hearings about with it. I remember it was me and one other person that dialed in on one. If you don't read the legal ads in the paper, again, why the paper is really important. You don't know these things are happening. And, I pleaded not to remove that zoning. And what happened was they went with a developer. What can I say? I don't know. I don't have the answer to the question as to. It wouldn't go to the commission because it wasn't big enough, not enough units and not a big enough parcel of land. So it wouldn't have gone to the commission. But there are regulatory agreements that do waive zoning, which is another issue entirely.
Yeah.
Okay, I think there are other things in Ms. Hunt's letter that we want. She also suggests about a red line version being posted, and I know that there were several comments in the 30 public comments that talk about red line, and we're doing that, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to do that when this happens. Okay, good. Anybody else have any comments or discussion about her letter?
The only other thing I saw was on page 119 of Business Barnstable.
Oh, yeah.
And as a taxpayer funded tool to draw business to Barnstable. I think that depends on what business I think if you look at Osterville, it's a classic example of when I was a kid, you could go over there to the pharmacy, dress store, stationery store, all kinds of stores. And now it's either investment banking or realtors. That's
Sure.
pretty much.
Or restaurants. Yeah.
Restaurants, pretty much that's all that's there. And I think, I think it would be good to work on getting those kind of services, back out to the periphery of the town. Because it would help people who are less mobile or for whatever reason be able to survive in their own village without having to trek into Hyannis. Which if you talk to the people who moved to Katuitt in the late 70s and 80s and hereafter, everything they do is towards Falmouth and Mashpee.
Right.
A lot of them don't go to Hyannis. God, they can't stand the trip to Hyannis. It's awful. It takes forever. And without even having done it, they just, like some people talking to them, they just never go to Hyannis. So I think that's another reason why people aren't interested or informed in what's going on.
Yeah, her request here was for data, basically, to see how successful this has been. Or I don't think she's challenging. She just says there's missing data and information on this. Wouldn't that be nice to have? And I think that's true. If you're going to talk about Business Barnstable, let's talk about its successes. I think that's a really good idea. Can we get data on that? Do you know, Kate, or no?
I can look into that, and maybe we can, any suggestions for improvement could be incorporated with phase 2, but let me see what we can provide on that website.
Okay. Anybody else have any other comments? Did staff had comment on this that we missed?
No, you captured everything that we had highlighted.
Okay.
I think
So we're done?
now.
You
So we
want to go
had,
over my comments? No?
we also had the letter from the Barnstable Land Trust as well.
Oh, yeah, let's do
And
that.
then that Hyannis history. So, and certainly just want to acknowledge there's 6 minutes till 10, but I think if we can get through the land trust letter. Let me, so when I'll just give a quick introduction to what our overview of this letter was. Certainly we appreciate everyone's comments, and I'm coordinating a meeting with Janet Milkman to talk about this a little bit more closely.
Oh,
as you
good.
can see, as my email just popped up. So we felt that the first few comments were more broadly speaking to Massachusetts as a whole and weren't as specifically tied to Barnstable. It's talking about commercial fishing and seafood industry in Massachusetts. But they did have a few comments that I am going to talk with Janet about with regard to values for protected acres that I want to work with Janet to make sure that we're all on the same page. So that was our biggest takeaway, is we want to make sure that the values are accurate, but some of the other comments we felt were more broadly speaking to Massachusetts and less specific to the town of Barnstable. But I certainly want to open this up to the committee's discussion, and I'll report back on my conversations with Janet on these values.
I had
Okay,
a comment about one of these.
go ahead.
If we're going to talk about land conservation, I think the first bullet point they say avoiding increased costs of public services is kind of a terrible comment to make. I mean, unless you're going to oppose every single home built or every business built, you're basically saying no more growth. You know, we don't want any more people here. We don't want any more families here, because when families come in, they may require rescue services. You know, they may require public school accommodations. And I just think that's a very narrow comment to make. And that's what that screams, is that no more growth. We don't need any more families. We don't need any more people here. So that really stuck out strongly. I mean, there are plenty of reasons to protect land and to promote land conservation, but avoiding the cost of public services should not be one of them.
I don't think she's saying that that's the reason that you would do it. I think she's just saying that it can potentially improve your bottom line because studies have shown the following, you know, that's all. She's just saying this information's out there. I don't think she's suggesting it as a policy statement for the town.
I hope not, because it's something I've seen repeated multiple times by Barnstable Land Trust.
Yeah, well, that's what their data bank says, so that's what they use, you know.
As long as we don't adopt that, then whatever.
Well, it doesn't seem to me like we would say it as a incentive.
We talked about
Scroll
this.
down to the chart a little
Yes.
bit, and below that. Yeah, she's got the thing about, so on page 30 of the executive summary, and I don't remember that, chapter 61, lands are sold for non-61 use and not conservation. The town has the right of first refusal. Is she referring to the fact that we didn't write that in there, or that statement isn't made? I don't know. I'm not sure. So can you check on that?
Yeah, I'll follow up with Janet and see if we need to elaborate on that language any further.
So chapter 61 lands, if I'm not mistaken, are lands that are, what are they, conservation lands, but people don't pay taxes on them? Is that how that works? Not because of their conservation restriction, but I don't know. We should find out what that is.
Yeah, we can look at that language and
Okay.
we'll work with Janet and make any edits.
Because it might be an opportunity for the town to convert those kinds of lands to housing or other things. I'm not sure what chapter 61 is, to be honest with you. I know it has to do with conservation and taxes, but I don't know what the relationship is. So she's making suggestions here about page 43. Planning tools need to be supplemented by direct open space protection. I would refer that to the phase 2 portion of our land. I mean, our project. And she worked on, it's interesting, page 45 also that she talks
Mhm.
about. I think other people have picked up on this all along.
Yeah, that's a repeated comment, which we felt was
Right,
subjective, but we also felt that adding in the data from our OSRP that talked about land per village would be insightful. And then we could certainly in phase 2, make it a target, make it an action, a goal to increase open space in certain villages, looking at that data.
exactly. Good idea. Any other comments from committee members?
I just wanted to comment that on page 45, Ed Mycock, who was an attorney in Hyannis, told me that, I believe it was John Alger said to him, he lamented after the Depression was over, selling off so much of the town's land that they'd taken for non-payment of taxes. He thought it could have been used for other purposes, like housing. And the only other thing I wanted to say was the Santua post office had a zip code, but it was removed, deprocessed, or whatever in the late 70s.
All right, there's history, right? Cultural history right there.
Along the lines of history, unless there's any other comments on this letter from the Barnstable Land Trust, maybe we can look at that suggested language for Hyannis's history.
Okay,
And then we should be in pretty good shape for today. So it's these two sections. So I don't believe that you all received it from Felicia, and I can certainly scroll down, but this was my understanding suggested language with regard to providing some more history with the existing conditions report.
if we do that, we probably should do one for every village. I don't know that, you know, this individual was obviously motivated to do something for Hyannis because I believe he said that the page was blank or something like that. There was nothing in here that I saw that I haven't read before. What's the view of the committee members?
I think it's I think the historical perspective is important because, you know, just to let future generations know what went before. If you don't know where you've come from, you have a problem knowing where you should be going. I also love history.
Yeah, you know, it's also interesting. I was talking to some people the other day. Last year, if you all recall, this is like history of waterways kind of stuff too, but it changes everything. We canceled the fireworks in the town because we had to because of the what used to be called Egg Island when I was a kid, which was a sandbar, is now a permanent island again. So it was a permanent island back in the 30s, 1930s. And before that, and then was it Hurricane Carol, whatever it was, washed away. There were fish shanties and stuff on there. People used to fish. And then the hurricane wiped it all out. And so in my childhood, it was a sandbar. So at low tide, it appeared, and at high tide, you couldn't really sail over it, but you could powerboat over it. And now it's a permanent island again. And they
Yeah.
don't call it Egg Island anymore. I think they call it Smith's Point or something. I don't know where the heck that came from, but
Yeah,
it's
right.
Smith's Point now. But either way, the Terns are back nesting on it all by themselves. They said, hey, our home is back, and so generations later, here they are. So no more fireworks in Hyannis. I think it's great, but it just shows what goes around comes around, and here it is again, and that part of history is showing itself again. So I'm sure the boaters and the ferry guys all swear that the island's there now because it kind of gave them more room before, but the birds are happy. But I don't know why I'm telling you this, but it's just part of history back again. Maybe someday there'll be fishing shanties on it. No, I'm kidding. Not gonna happen. But, and even in my lifetime, Ocean Street was all residential, just captain's houses on it. There were no restaurants, no motels. I remember when they first built the first 2 hotels there. I mean, we liked it because one was on a hill and we could skateboard down the hill of the driveway right into Ocean Street. We thought it was great. But, changed. And the railroad warehouse was still at the end of the road when I was a kid for the railroad, because Old Colony wasn't built yet.
Yeah.
So little bits of history everywhere. Can we get a paragraph or 2 from each village, do you think, or is that too much work? What do you think? For existing conditions? It doesn't matter if it shows up now or if it shows up in phase 2, but I think it would be important to have it in the LCP finished product. What do you think?
I agree.
think Felicia, I think what we were talking about at one point was like an introductory chapter as well, which I don't think have reflected here just yet, but maybe after a culmination of the plan, we develop an introductory that has each of the villages and maybe touching on some existing conditions, touching on some, future aspects of it. I don't know. That's just something for the committee to think about.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure that the villages are well represented because, as you all know by now, people are very vehemently loyal to their villages and really, I think, want people to understand that and always assure that village character is respected in any future decision. That doesn't mean things can't grow, or that they have to stay the same. It just means that the character is maintained.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
This comment mentions the Makepeace family. Is that the same one of the West Barnstable Brick Company?
I don't know.
Because that's kind of a big deal still. I mean, people collect those.
Yeah. I didn't know Makepeace was part of the West Barnstable Brick thing. I just knew he was the cranberry guy.
Cranberry guy, yeah.
So, but you might be right. I mean, I'm not a
I think
North
he
Side
owned
person.
it.
Could be. He was a very enterprising guy. He owned the bank too. So, wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
It was probably the only other industry other than salt making over there at the time. And fishing, obviously.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, well, I think that's all the comments. We can certainly talk about this further at our full committee meeting at the end of June, and I'll have all this language ready to discuss with the full committee. But I think I appreciate everyone's time. We've gone through all of the comments that were submitted. I have a plan of how to achieve those edits from your feedback, which I really appreciate, and going through the letters too. So I think we're in a really good place, unless anyone had any other comments that weren't captured yet.
Nobody
Alicia,
from the
did you?
public present, so there's no public comment to be made. Does the subcommittee want to meet one more time before the full committee meets, just to go over the finished product before the meeting, or do you want to just wait for the meeting of the full committee?
I have no problem meeting one another time.
I have no problem.
I don't think it'll, I don't think it'll take too long, because we'll be looking at the red line version, whenever you have that ready.
Yeah,
And
we can. certainly do that.
It's basically just to see if anything glaring absence or something in the wrong place or something that's occurred to you since.
Yeah, let me send out another doodle survey.
Is that okay with you? You think you'll have time to do that?
Yeah, I can, I'll finish up those edits the end of
I mean-
this week, early next week, and then send out another doodle survey. Is everyone relatively available between June 7th through June 15th? Or at least accessible to Zoom?
Yes.
Okay,
As far as I know.
That's a long work stretch for me, but I could probably make it work.
okay, I
Um,
just want to make sure you're,
I mean, it could just
available
be,
for
it
Zoom, so-
just could be a couple of days before the real meeting. It doesn't have to be, too far out, unless you have
Yeah.
work to do in
Yep.
between. I don't know. Up to
Yeah,
you.
we can certainly do that. Our goal is to get materials to the full committee a week in advance of the meeting. So
Okay,
I'd like to give them, I feel like it's nice to have the weekend to review because people get busy during the week. So if we did it anywhere between the 7th through the 15th, then we could send out those comments, the final red line, the 16th. So it'd give the full committee a weekend to review before the meeting on the 22nd.
okay. Are you likely to do a Wednesday, or it would be any day? Because I'll just tell you, Monday, the 12th morning is no good for me.
I'll just send out if the doodle
Okay.
survey worked for everyone last
Yeah.
time, I'll just send out all the pockets of
Okay.
time that we have available. And then once it seems like we have a time that works for all parties, I'll follow up to make sure it
Okay.
does in fact work for everyone to meet via Zoom.
Great.
Okay.
All right. So anybody have any other comments? All right, so I'll take a roll call. I'll take a motion to adjourn from
So
somebody.
moved.
Second,
Second,
roll call.
Ram Parks, aye.
Megan Mort, aye.
Felicia Penn, aye. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.